At the outset, I would like to thank AIS, especially Dr. Santosh Sonawar sir, for giving me this opportunity. Actually, it's an honor to be part of this program amongst the teachers whom I've always admired, like Professor Dogra and Pramod Dende sir. So what I was allotted Retina X file. So what I have done is I've collected 9 cases which we have seen in past few years. These are not very common cases that you see, but they can confuse some of the common with some of the common entities. Uh, so my first case is an 18-year-old male who presented with the blurring of vision in the right eye, and uh, so what you see is that the posterior pole appears normal, while in the periphery you see these hard exudates, and these exudates are extensive and they are at different areas in the periphery. And you can also see some areas of hemorrhages. And when you see the enlarged view of the same area, you see these dilated vessels, telangiectatic vessels, along with some. So these the left eye fundus was essentially normal. And when you see the FFA, these areas of capillary dilatation and the bulb-like aneurysms, which Dr. Shaurya also showed beautifully in one of the angiographs, are all. And what you can also see is some of the vessels which are occluded, and there are areas of capillary non-perfusion. So this is a case of Coats disease, and we treated this with laser photocoagulation and anti-VEGFs, and you can see after almost 1 year of follow-up, there is a lot of scarring and fibrosis. There are still areas which look active, but by and large, the patient is doing well. So Coats disease is an idiopathic exudative retinopathy, and usually seen in young males. The average age of presentation is around 6 years, and hence then can be confused with retinoblastoma. One point to differentiate between Coats and retinoblastoma is, especially when they present with exudative detachment, is the presence of telangiectasias in Coats and the calcification, which is usually absent in Coats, while it is seen commonly in retinoblastoma. Uh, they can lead to complications, especially neovascular glaucoma, if they remain undetected for long. And treatment, as I said, can be with lasers, cryopexy, or anti-VEGFs. Sometimes they may also need pars plana vitrectomy. So this is my second case, almost very similar, but the exudates are predominantly on the posterior pole, if you can see. And the right eye is, the media is hazy because of the vitreous hemorrhage. The patient presented with history of 3 years of vision loss in the right eye. No other systemic disorder. The left eye vision was 6/6. If you see carefully in the left eye, what you see essentially is a large aneurysm over the optic disc, and what you also see are these aneurysms along the supratemporal artery, and these are more evident on fluorescent angiography. Very classical knot-like aneurysms along the supratemporal artery, and this is the other eye which underwent pars plana vitrectomy almost had a similar appearance, except for that the aneurysms were not very clearly visible on FFA. So this is a case of Irwan, and I saw my first case of Irwan, which was shown to me by Professor Dogra himself. So since then, it has intrigued me a lot. Most importantly, there are 3 things which you need to see in Irwan. One is retinal vasculitis, the other classical aneurysms, and neuroretinitis, which forms 3 component or Irwan. And these aneurysms are dynamic, so they can come and go. And they are usually Y-shaped along the arterioles, which give a typical knot-like appearance in the arteries. There are extensive areas of capillary non-perfusion that can lead to neovascular complications, and usually these patients do not have any systemic association. This is my third case, and this is a 19-year-old female who presented with transient loss of visions, dizziness, headache. The visual acuity in both eye was good. The other things were normal. However, she had in the right eye anterior segment neovascularization. And what you see, if you see carefully in this, you can see that there is presence of neovascularization over the disc in the right eye. And when you see in the periphery, what you see is these areas of capillary pruning and microaneurysms, multiple microaneurysms, and these are more evident on on the FFA. And you can see these microaneurysms, there is sluggish flow in the vessels, and these microaneurysms, numerous microaneurysms that are lit up, and you can see peripheral areas of non-perfusion. So the FFA also showed a delayed AV phase and sluggish flow. So this is what is typically seen in ocular ischemic syndrome. And this was a case where the BP was unrecordable in the upper limb, even in the lower limb, it was relatively low on the lower side. And on imaging, what was evident was there was stenosis of common internal and external carotid arteries. So this is a case of Takayasu's arthritis, and this can be confused with sometimes aneurysms, presence of aneurysms, you can get confused with diabetic retinopathy. So it's a rare granulomatous inflammation, and the mainly involves aorta, most common in females. This is an occlusive arthritis, and it leads to ocular ischemic syndrome, which is one of the differential diagnoses of ocular ischemic syndrome. Takayasu's retinopathy has different stages, and what we see in this case is the neovascular complication in the right eye, and you need to treat this patient very aggressively with steroids and immunosuppressants. This is my fifth case, and again this patient, a 30-year-old female who presented with diminution of vision in the right eye for 3 years. And what you see on the posterior pole is extensive areas of exudation with some pigmentation as well in the fovea. And if you see carefully, the inferior artery is relatively more dilated inferior vessel than as compared to the superior ones. So, and when you look into the periphery, what you see is this orangish lesion which is there in the periphery, and the vessels seem to be feeding this this lesion, and this appears to give rise to all these exudation. This is more evident on FFA, and this is very brightly lit up during the mid phase of the angiogram, and you can see the dilated vessel over here. So this is a case of capillary hemangioma, and they are the most frequent and earliest manifestation. So in an ophthalmologist, your VHL patient may present with capillary hemangioma, and you would be the first one to make a diagnosis of VHL. They are commonly solitary, although 1/3 can have multiple lesions. They can be divided into peripheral or juxtapapillary hemangioma, as in this case, or they can be exudative, as I've shown in the previous case, or there could be tractional detachment with a lot of fibrotic component. Usually they are treated, if they are less than 4 mm, they are treated with laser photocoagulation, as we did in this case, or if they are larger and associated with subretinal fluid, then you can use cryo. Sometimes they can present with retinal detachment as well, and then you might have to do a surgery. Important thing is that they can get systemic tumors, and hence you need to keep screening them yearly for these tumors, as it's important. This is a case, a 50-year-old female who presented to us with vision of 636, and on examination what we saw is these areas of saccular aneurysms, okay, and these are in clusters of grapes along with along with lot of fibrosis. Now if you see the angiogram, you can see what you see is lit up with aneurysms along with capping. And these capping are basically because of separation. There's a sluggish flow of blood in this, and because of separation of RBCs and plasma, the plasma appears in the periphery, and so it gives a sort of capping of aneurysm. You can see also on OCT, these are lobulated spaces in the inner retina along with epiretinal membrane, as you can see over here. So this is a cavernous hemangioma, which is a benign tumor. Visual acuity usually is normal. There may be rarely neurocutaneous hemangiomas as well. Now, shifting gaze to macular pathology, this was a 9-year-old male who presented with diminution of vision in both the eyes. I'll just show the enlarged view of the right eye macula, and you can see these cartwheel-like edema. And on OCT, you can see schisis of the macular area. Now, this is a case of congenital retinoschisis, and you can get confused with macular edema for other reasons, and it is usually X-linked, and the mutation is in the retinoschisin gene, which is an adhesion protein, and it leads to classical spoke wheel pattern. You can also have peripheral retinoschisis. Importantly, the fluorescein will not show any leakage. And you can see on OCT, the splitting is more evident. Now, this is my 7th case, which is a 34-year-old male who presented with unilateral vision loss. And you can see this area of neurosensory detachment with some yellow spots in the center. And you can see that it is extending towards the optic disc. And the OCT, very similar to what I showed, had a neurosensory detachment along with schisis of or intraretinal fluid as well. And these fluid is showing an connection with the optic disc. So this is an optic disc pit with maculopathy, and this patient underwent pars plana vitrectomy, and you can see the outcome after a year or so. So optic disc pit maculopathy is a congenital disc anomaly, and usually you will see a round grayish white excavation infratemporal to the disc. About 40%, about a half of these patients will present with maculopathy, and if you not treat them, there would be progressive loss of vision. The origin of fluid is still debatable. It could be from the vitreous or CSF. Again, there is no leakage on FFA, and usually they are treated with pars plana with gas. This is an interesting case who presented with a painless loss of vision since 1 week, and what you see essentially is a cystic lesion in the posterior pole with a very bright white spot at the center, and the OCT also shows a cystic lesion with an hyperreflective lesion at the center. Now, this is a subretinal cysticercosis, and we have had one more case. I'll just show you how in this video. I hope it runs. Sorry, it's not running anyway. Yeah. So in this video, you can see the cyst moving. You can see it moves as you try to engage and remove it from the subretinal space. So, and you can see the bright white spot, which is the scolex. So it is caused by the larvae of Taenia solium, and the live cyst has a well-defined scolex, as you can see here. Or dead and dying cyst can lead to a lot of inflammation, and many of the times these patients will present with inflammation, with severe intense inflammation or recombinous retinal detachment, and you generally need to pass plana vitrectomy for removal of cyst. So this is my last case, a 8-year-old male who basically presented for a cataract surgery to us. And on closer examination, what you can see is these hypopigmented area in the posterior pole, specifically around the disc. And OCT, very similar to what was seen in optic disc pit, but this time it was bilateral. And there was thickening of the choroid, which was more towards the nasal side as compared to the temporal half of the fovea. And you can see these large Pachy vessels So along with sciatic-like cavities in the retina. The FFA showed window defect, which was evident here. And this is what is defined as a new term, which was defined as peripapillary pachychoroid syndrome. And it forms a part of a spectrum of deep pachychoroid disease, which includes central serous choroidopathy,
It's
peripapillary.
my humble request to Dr. Alok Sen.
Last
Please
slide.
come up
Yeah,
with
this
the
is
slide,
last slide.
please.
So this is something which is new entity, and all the post-graduation students should know about this. There is thickening of the choroid, particularly of the halide layer, which causes attenuation of the inner layers. I think that's it.